Hello and welcome, my name is Racho, and today I will be covering a Warframe that is very close to my heart, Vault. Vault is one of my most favorite Warframes in the game, probably my second or third most favorite Warframe in the game. And he's also the Warframe I have the most builds for. I think I have 5, maybe 6 different builds for him. He is an incredibly versatile frame, but in this video I will only be showing off one of my builds because I don't want to make an hour-long video on a single Warframe. Anyway, let's get right into it and talk about his abilities first, and then I'll go over my build. So, first of all, Vault's passive. Honestly, it's a bit outdated. The way Vault's passive works is running along the ground or moving along the ground in any way, whether it be rolling, sliding, anything like that, will build up a charge, which you can see in the buffs next to his health bar, that adds a electricity damage buff to either his first ability, fourth ability, or his weapon strikes. It functions a bit weirdly though. It doesn't, the electricity damage buff that it gives to your attacks don't mix with other primary elements on the weapon. It also is unaffected by damage mods such as Serration or Stormbringer. However, it is affected by critical hits and also the sniper rifle combo counter. Also, weirdly enough, even with multi-shot, it will only apply once. So with multi-shot, it only applies to a single bullet, which is a bit funny. Anyway, the passive is very outdated because it builds slowly, and since you attack so much in this game, you're not really going to make use out of it much. So it's a very minimal damage buff at best. I really hope they change this passive to be more like Bunny's passive from the first Ascendant, which basically is a charge meter that builds when you run along the ground, and then it lowers if you stand still for too long, so it encourages you to stay moving and stay active. And the more charge she has, the more damage her abilities do. And I think that basically the same idea would work perfectly well on Vault. A charge meter that charges whenever he moves, the more charge it has, the more damage his abilities do, and the more of an electricity damage buff you get for your weapons. And I don't think a passive consistent damage buff to all your attacks is that big of a, that great of a passive either, considering that Varuna's passive is a damage buff that she gets to her weapons. So why can't Vault have a passive electricity damage buff as well? So I think that'd be really cool. Vault's first ability is called Shock, and by itself it's quite underwhelming. It literally just throws out an electricity bolt that chains between enemies and also applies the electricity status effect, stunning them, giving you a bit of crowd control. It does basically no damage, so there's really nothing major it does in that way. However, with the Augment Shock Trooper, you can hold cast the ability to give yourself and or allies within range an electricity damage buff. This electricity damage buff recently got changed, so it now also doesn't mix with modded elements, meaning it can work really well with melee influence because you can do damage setups with melee influence that you previously wouldn't be able to do because you need electricity for melee influence, like electricity heat, for example. What's more is this is also Vault's helmet ability, so you can use Shock Trooper on any Warframe you want. Vault's second ability is called Speed. Speed will simply increase Vault's movement speed as well as any other ally within range of the ability by a relatively good amount. It is a percentage increase of movement speed, so the higher your base movement speed is, the more of an increase you'll get. And the amount and the percent that your movement speed is actually increased by is also scaled off strength. In addition to this, while the ability is activated, your reload speed will also be increased. And the ability will also increase your attack speed, making it also give you a damage buff for your melees as well. The Augment for this ability will basically give Vault a aura around him that will deal electricity damage to all enemies that are within range of it. It's not really enough to do damage by itself in most circumstances, but it does work quite well with Inaris' Hangavats. Vault's third ability is called Electric Shields. Vault's third ability will summon an electric shield that will block all damage from enemies that fires through it. However, enemies will still be able to walk through it. Interacting with the ability will allow you to pick up the ability and have it face where you are currently looking. However, the width of it is lowered dramatically. You can actually shoot your first ability through it, which will charge the shields, making it so that whenever enemies now walk through it, they will take the damage of your first ability, but that is minimal at best. However, the real benefit of Vault's third ability is that the buffs it gives to your weapons when you shoot through it. Shooting through the shield will, first of all, give you a electricity damage buff of 50%. This electricity damage buff once again does not mix with elements, and it does stack with each shield. And you can have up to 6 shields active at one time, giving you a 300% electricity damage buff in total. What's more, the damage shooting through the shields will also give you a 200% crit damage buff that doesn't stack with each shield. So one shield will give you the full 200%, 6 shields will also give you 200%. And this crit damage buff is actually multiplicative, meaning it essentially doubles whatever your modded crit damage is. So if your modded crit damage is 5, shooting through the shields will now have your crit damage be 10. So an amazing buff. What's more, because this buff doesn't actually get applied to your weapons or warframes or anything like that, instead it gets applied when you shoot through it, it is also the only ability in the game, unless I'm forgetting one, that can buff Operator and Necromech damage. This is why Vault is the meta of all metas for Eidolons and also Profiteer speedruns, because no other Warframe can buff Operator damage and no other Warframe can buff Necromech damage. Vault actually has 2 augments for this mod. The first one simply makes it so that enemies that walk through, allies that walk through the shields will have a bit of their shields recharged. The second one will allow allies to also pick up the shields, and it will also make it that a part of the damage that is blocked by the shields will go towards Vault's electric discharge, his passive, so it can build up faster. Vault's 4th ability is called Discharge. It will fire out electricity damage in a full 360 AoE. Enemies that get affected by the ability will become a supercharged electric status effect will be placed on them that creates, basically making them Tesla coils. As you saw just then, enemies affected by the ability will spread the electricity damage they receive to all nearby enemies around them. The ability actually does really good damage against enemies of base star chart. However, against Steel Path enemies, it isn't really the best damage source in the game. It is fully capable of nuking base star chart enemies, but takes a bit more work on Steel Path. However, as you can see here, with the right setup, it is still capable of doing some pretty good damage. Obviously, it didn't fully nuke these enemies, which shows off that its damage does definitely not scale the best. But considering how much damage it just did to heavy gunners, which are very tanky enemies, you can see that it is still at least somewhat capable of nuking enemies in at least base Steel Path. What's more, however, is this ability's augment will make it so that you and your allies will have shield recharged based on the amount of damage the ability does to enemies, making it a very effective way to fully restore your shields, as it also extends into overshields, giving you a lot of survivability. Vault is an incredibly versatile frame, capable of doing things that other Warframes can't, can give you very powerful buffs to your primary technical weapon, very powerful buffs to your melee, able to fully restore your shields in order to easily shield gate or even shield tank for base Steel Path. He is very powerful and is easy to see how he is easily one of the best Warframes in the entire game. So let's talk about the build that I have showing off for you today. The build I have for you is a very basic melee influence melee build, which is making use of the Helminth ability Roar, which will triple dip with melee influence, as well as Vault's second ability to increase his attack speed. He will also use his third ability and use the interact button to give it that directional damage resistance, and also his fourth ability with the augment for the extra survivability. I'll be using the Genshin Prime simply because of how much multi-shot Warframes have, making it incredibly powerful with melee influence, especially with blast melee influence setups, allowing you to kill enemies very effectively, as you can see. So let's look at the build. The Vault build is very simple. We are using Primed Flow for the extra energy. Honestly, we won't be casting enemies too much, and Vault Prime does have 300 energy by default, so you don't really need Primed Flow, so you could get rid of it if you wanted to. Regular Vault only has 150 energy though, so on him you might want to consider using Primed Flow, or at least normal flow if you don't have Primed Flow. Steel Charger does give us the damage buff to melees, but is really only being used by me because of the extra mod capacity it gives, so that's entirely up to you. Power Drift gives us a little bit of extra ability strength, also not needed, but I was able to mod it on, so I decided to go for it. Prime Continuity for the extra duration. Don't need a lot of duration, but the extra duration is very nice in this build still. The same principle applies for range, but most importantly, Archon Shards is being used because of its additional effect that gives us an energy regen over time whenever we afflict electricity status, whenever we deal electricity damage to enemies with our abilities, which obviously happens very easily by simply just casting our first or our fourth ability. and we will be using our 4th ability for shields for our main source of survivability with the augment right here. Prime redirection, obviously to increase our shields, because this is a shield tank setup, paired with adaptation. Lastly, blind rage and umbra intensify for the ability strength. We have arcane ages for some ability extra survivability with shields. This is honestly a flex shot thanks to his 4th ability augment. You can put on Fury for the extra melee damage if you wanted, for example. You wouldn't really need to run Strike because of his 3rd ability, but if you wanted to go absolutely crazy with the amount of extra attack speed you wanted to run, you could still use Strike if you wanted to. Arcane Energize is also not really needed because, again, you're not casting abilities too often, and with Primed Flow and Archon Stretch as well, unnecessary. So again, a bit of a flex slot. You could run a few different things here if you wanted to. Honestly, really light on the arcanes. You could run a few different things. Next, we have the Gunson Prime build. You don't need to run Gunson Prime. You could really run any melee you want. I personally just use Gunson Prime because it's a very good Warframe, and Warframes have a lot of multi-hits with their Volatile Onslaught stance. What a multi-hit means is it's basically multi-shot for melees. Basically, when I hit with the weapon, instead of just hitting an enemy once, I'm hitting the enemy multiple times. With Volatile Onslaught, it's forward stance. The first has 4 hits in the combo. The first hit hits once, second hit twice, third hits 3 times, the fourth hit hits 4 times, which works out to be 10 hits with 4 melee hits. Like, the combo is 4 melee actions, but you're hitting enemies 10 times. So a lot of multi-shots, which means amazing for status priming, for status applying, and which works really well with blast status effects, especially with melee influence, which triple dips with faction damage like Raw. We have Galvanized Steel mainly for the crit damage, but it does also increase our crit chance. Ladder Rush for the crit chance, Weeping Marines for the status chance, Condition Overload for the base damage, and Berserker Fury for the attack speed. We do have our Blast from here, and then we also have Electricity for the companion. We're just going to use the Taxon to overclock our shield survivability even more. The reason why we use Taxon is because of molecular conversion, which gives us some shield regen whenever Taxon performs a specific attack move. On top of that, we also have Shield Charger and Guardian, which can be used on any robotics. Shield Charger will further increase our shields and shield regeneration rate by 60%, and Guardian will fully restore our shields once when they get depleted and then go on cooldown. These 3 mods give us a lot of shield regen and shield protection for our Warframe, making us a lot more tanky with shield tank setups. We have Menafel Bond to reduce the cooldown of all 3 mods, Momentumous Bond to make it so that if the companion goes down, killing an Xmas will lower its recovery timer by 8 seconds, Synth Deconstruct, so when our companion attacks enemies, it will increase the drop chance of health orbs, Calculated Redirection, Enhanced Vitality for the companion's survivability, Assault Mode so the companion can attack enemies, and Vacuum is a must-have. For Guardian, Shield Charger, and Molecular Conversion, make sure you put them in this order. Order is very important on companions when it comes to preset mods. If you want to find out more about why this is the case, I would recommend checking out my robotics companion video, which I'll leave it in the description down below. For the weapon, we are using Taziko. Taziko is a chaining beam gun for Sentinel weapons that has a really good status chance, making it the best primer in the game when it comes to Sentinel weapons. It primes really effectively. We have fast hands for the reload speed, Rifle Aptitude for status chance, Prime Shred for the fire rate and punch through, and then we have Split Chamber for multi-shot. And then the additional weapons are simply just our status effects. Electricity comes by default for Taziko. It does inherit electricity. We've also modded on Viral through Maligent Force and Rim Rounds, and then we have Radiation through Radiant Reload and Magnetic Capacity with Magnetic, which gives us crowd control with Radiation and Electricity, and also increased damage against enemies' health, and also shields and overguard through Viral and Magnetic. Additionally, that is 4 status effects for Condition Overload priming. For the utility weapons, simply just run whatever rifle or secondary you want. We want a rifle for Amalgam Serration for the extra movement speed, and also make sure you are putting on primary dexterity for the extra combo duration. And then for the secondary, you'd want Amalgam Barrel Diffusion for the extra rolling speed, and once again, we want secondary dexterity for the extra combo duration as well. For the Focus School, as this is a melee build, we are using Narumon as the first Power Strike passive. Will make it so that whenever our combo duration does run out, instead of getting rid of all of our combo, we'll only reduce it by 5. And lastly, I do want to mention I am running a Tower Forge casting speed shard on Volt. This just is kind of needed to increase the casting speed of his 4th ability, as it is a bit slow. Raw is also a bit slow, so it does make use of that there. The other 2 casting speed shards aren't needed for this build. It is for my Eidolon setup, so don't worry about that. Anyway, that is all from this video. I do hope you enjoyed it and got a good new build out of it. and I am probably likely to make some future videos related to my other Vault builds as well. As I said, I do have a lot of them. Vault is an incredibly versatile Warframe, and I have a lot of different builds for him just because he can do so much different stuff. So I hope you stick around to see what my other builds are for him whenever that happens. I make no promises on the timeline of that happens. And also go check out some of my other videos. You might find some other Warframes you're interested in. They might have some other videos there. And give me some recommendations for any Warframe you'd like me to see make a build on. And give me a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And until next time, bye-bye.